right, so to start, we're going to remove this back seat. Grab underneath, it's held on by 2 clips. Pop it up, there's one on each side. Now pull it up and out, set it aside. Now let's lift up this cover. It's just held on by some beetle tape. So it's just some sticky goo there basically that holds it down. So pry it up with whatever you have. Watch out for this stuff because it sticks, and if it gets on your carpet or your clothes, it's most likely not going to come off. And to move this a little more out of the way, I'm going to disconnect the connector for the fuel pump. Sometimes these get stuck with sand here, so might need a screwdriver to help me pry the locking tab in. There we go. Pull this up, set it aside. I have a vacuum cleaner here. I'm going to vacuum up all this debris before I open anything with the fuel system. You don't want electric motors running, inhaling, or sucking in fuel fumes because they can make sparks, and well, you know what happens after that. Now there's 2 bolts that hold this cover on, one over here and one over there. So let's remove those, that way we can disconnect the fuel line. 8mm socket, remove both of those. Now we can disconnect the fuel line. To do that, you want to pinch down on these 2 clips here. Sometimes using pliers is a little bit easier. Watch out because fuel might come out. So I'm going to hold a rag right on top of it. That way it doesn't spray right at my face. There we go. There wasn't much. The car has been sitting for about 24 hours, so the fuel pressure dropped a little bit. There's still obviously going to be fuel in the line, but it won't spray. So obviously here's your gas tank. And the exhaust is in the way for dropping the gas tank. So you're gonna have to remove the exhaust, or at least part of it. And if yours is not super rusted like ours is, you're probably going to be able to just unbolt it here and here, remove it off the muffler. Obviously you'll need a new gasket, and then if you follow it up right in front of the catalytic converter, you're gonna have a flange with 2 bolts as well. You can unbolt it there and drop it down. Of course, there's the O2 sensor. That's gonna have to get either disconnected or unthreaded from the exhaust. Now, because ours is rusted, we might go a different route. And if you do choose to go a different route, basically what that means is you can either cut it somewhere and then clamp it back on. If you think that the bolts or the flanges are too fragile and they won't make it, you can cut it anywhere, and then they make these clamps that basically slide on both sides with a gasket in between and secure everything together. Of course, if you know how to weld, you can weld it back together. Basically, what this comes down to is get the exhaust out of the way so we can drop the gas tank. I'm going to try and disconnect this flange here, this pipe off the muffler. It might work, it might not. As you can see, it's in somewhat poor condition. So I'm going to heat up the nuts on the back side and then try to take the bolts out. Okay, there's the second one. Separates, perfect. Now at the front of the car, right in front of the catalytic converter, there's another flange here. My bolts here are extremely rotted, so first I wanted to cut them, but I decided to, instead of making all that dust, to just break them off with this. Okay, that's exactly what I wanted actually. There we go. Now let's separate this. There we go. Obviously, you're going to need new gaskets for both of these areas. We'll worry about this later. Now at the back, you see a hanger here. I sprayed it with some lubricant, preferably silicone spray is what you want to use. And then I'm just going to grab it with some pliers and pop it off. There we go. Watch out when it comes down. Obviously, you have to support it with something. We still have an oxygen sensor hooked up at the front. I'm going to support it with my pole jack here. Let's move to the front. Now let's disconnect this one at the front here. This is the last thing holding this part of the exhaust on. So keep in mind that it will fall down at this point, but I do have my 2 pole jacks supporting it. And the reason I did this is so that I don't have to disconnect the oxygen sensor. That way it can stay here and I can just move the pipe out of my way. If you're working on the ground, obviously this is going to be easier because you can just lay this down on the ground. Now let's disconnect the filler neck, and as you can see, my clamp is in pretty poor condition. The bolt actually for the clamp. So I'm going to take a 10mm socket, try to hammer it on here gently. clamp is spinning, so I don't want to go any further. Let's grab a ratchet and see if we can take that out. All right, it seems to be working. That's great. Obviously, I'm going to be replacing this clamp, but as long as it comes out, I'm happy. Loosen it up as much as you can, but obviously you don't have to remove it all the way. You just have to loosen it up so the hose can come off. Okay, push this up and out of the way. That's good enough for now. Now we can pull the filler hose off, filler neck hose. Sometimes this is kind of stuck on the tank, so we might need a pry bar or something to help it along. Give it a couple twists to break it free. Remove it, set it aside. I'm going to take this clamp off, that way I can replace it at the end. Let's grab these two hoses and pull those off as well. My clamp is rotted on this one, so I'm just going to try and pull the hose straight off. There's one. Do the same to this one. This clamp is also rotted, but unfortunately it's still on there, so let's see if we can break this one free the same way. There we go, that came off as well. On each side of the vehicle right here where the trailing arm is, you'll notice this 10mm bolt that holds on your parking brake cables. Let's remove those. Okay, that makes a lot more room. Do the same to the other side. I have my transmission jack here, which has this fuel tank support on it. Obviously, if you're on the ground, you're gonna have to do something a little different. Maybe you don't even need a support, but whatever you do, make sure that when you take these straps down, it doesn't come falling off. So I'm gonna position this here like that, put a little bit of pressure on it, not a lot, and now we'll take these straps down. Okay, if you follow the strap all the way at the back up top there is a 14mm bolt. Remove that. So I would just want to mention, you should probably either do this by hand or use air tools, not electric tools. That way you don't potentially get sparks out with the fuel system open. There's the bolt. And let's take the other strap down as well, or the bolt for the strap, I guess. Okay, now let's pull the straps down. These are stuck to the tank here. Okay, broke free. Pull this down. I'm replacing these straps, so obviously these are in poor condition. Now let's try to go down. Okay, perfect. Go slow in case anything gets hung up. Make sure the parking brake cables go over. It's got this very wide lip on the outside, so make sure that doesn't get stuck on anything. Go down. Let's check the back, make sure that's good. Okay, looks like we got some connections here. There's a few more things to disconnect at the back here. I'll start with this hose. It had a hose clamp on. This one's in very poor condition. I will be replacing this one as well. So just going to grab onto the hose, try to break it free, and remove it because this clamp isn't really holding pressure anymore, so it should just pop off. There we go. Get the remaining clamp off here. Then we have this connector here, this hose, which is going to the charcoal canister. And to remove this, you actually have to squeeze in on both sides, so this will be a little bit challenging. Let's get a little pocket screwdriver. So to disconnect this, you actually have to pry out on both sides. Right in there, there's a locking tab, basically. And it's hard to do because you don't have much room, and it's hanging up here. And I'm going to try to use 2 picks and do them both at the same time. Okay, I think I unhooked it. Let's pull it out. Perfect. So basically what I was trying to do, these 2 tabs are here are what locks it in. So I put my pick in here and pried it out on both sides. And then we're left with this hose right here, which is gonna be difficult to take out of here. So I'll just follow it up and unplug it from the canister. So if you follow this hose up, you'll see that it connects on the charcoal canister. It's supposed to have a clamp. Mine has rotted away, so I'm just going to take my pliers and pull it right off. There we go. We'll remember to put a clamp on this later. Let's grab this fuel line and pop it off of here. That goes up. Cover it with a rag, that way it doesn't spill everywhere. Now let's lower the tank, and this should be everything we had to do to get it off of the car. So we have to transfer everything over to the new fuel tank. So I'm going to start with this right here. The cover that holds this in basically just twists off. So I'm going to take a hammer and try to spin it counterclockwise to unlock it. There we go. I should have mentioned this, but I put some rust penetrant all around to hopefully help this work its way out. At this point, this is just held on by a rubber gasket that is kind of stuck in here. So let's pry up on this. And I have a new gasket. Should have come with your new fuel tank. I'm going to use 2 pry bars, one on each side. Hopefully, by doing that, I can pop it straight up and out. There it comes. It's a little tight in there with this rubber gasket. Make sure you don't get any debris inside the fuel tank. Slide this all the way out. There it goes. And remember which orientation it went in. So I remember it was not perpendicular to the fuel tank. It was kind of at an angle, pointing about the same direction as these 2 lines here. So I'll try to transfer this the same way on the new fuel tank. Here's the brand new gasket. Slide this onto the fuel tank first, and it has this lip here that has to slide down and connect in there. Now let's put this down in. Slide it all the way down. There it goes, just like this. Now take this cap, line it up, and we'll spin it clockwise to lock it in. Make sure all of these little tabs go in where they're supposed to. There it goes. Okay, let's grab the hammer. I'm going to cover this hole with this rag, that way no rust chips make their way in there. There we go. You want to make sure that this line is unhooked. My clips are already broken, so there's no need for these. I'll just pop them off right now. Typically, you'd want to transfer them over, but most likely yours are going to be broken anyway. Now let's go backwards with a hammer. This slides right off. So these two, they are connected and they have to come off together. So I'm going to tap this cover off as well. That way I can lift both of them up at the same time. Or almost at the same time, I guess. Since I'm here, I'll just start with this one. We'll do the same thing. A couple pry bars. Try to lift evenly on both sides. They're just held in with the pressure of the gasket. And now let's do the same to this one. Here's this one as well. Let's transfer this over. Let's put the gaskets in first. These are the same, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which you put where. Make sure they're seated all the way, that way it makes a nice tight seal. Do the same to this one over here. Okay, now take this, slide it in, press it down all the way. When you press it down, make sure the gasket doesn't buckle and go in. There we go. That's in. Let's do the same to that one.
Be careful not to break the fuel line when you do this. Press it down all the way.
There it goes. Now let's put these little caps on to lock the, basically to protect this from coming out or debris hitting it or anything. So lock these on all the way. Let's put this front one on as well. Make sure it slides onto both sides. Perfect. Now let's remove the fuel pump. Remove the remaining 8mm bolts that are all around. Let's remove the fuel pump. Watch out, there might be gas on it. Now just find the right angle that it wants to be at to get out of here. Okay, pull it up and out. Transfer it over to the new tank. And I'm going to take this off and remove the old gasket. It came with a new one, so let's put this down just so we can stay in here, and let's grab the new gasket. Let's put the new gasket on. Okay, drop this down, make sure it's sitting approximately in the same position that it was before, just like this. Put the locking ring on, and let's put the bolts back. Make sure it lines up with the bolt holes. So there's actually right there. Okay, start all of them in, but remember this one right here and I think this one right here were not on because it had that bracket that covers the fuel line. So leave those off. Just start on the rest of them. You don't have to go crazy tight on these because they're small and they will break. I'm going to go in a cross pattern and just make them snug once they bottom out. Give them a little extra and stop right there. So this is bottomed out. A little bit more, and that's good enough. These are small bolts, and like I said, they will break. To take the foam pads out, it's important that you transfer these over. They should still be somewhat sticky. Hopefully yours are. If not, you can glue them with, I don't know, anything you have that can glue them on. I'll do 3 at a time. There was one in the middle right here, one on this bump here, and then one on this bump over here. Looks like I'll have to apply some glue to this one. That's fine. Let's move the other ones over first. There was one right here in the middle, and then one over here. I'm gonna glue that one too. One right over here. Glue that one too. And one right here. Now I'm gonna bring my fuel tank up. I'm gonna reconnect the hoses back here first. As you push it up, or lift it up, I guess, watch out so it doesn't pinch the brake, parking brake cables, and make sure it's still centered where it needs to be. I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to start by connecting this hose back where it needs to be. Let's reconnect this hose right up there. I put a new hose clamp on it. Let me turn this hose clamp before it goes up all the way, that way I can reach it. There we go. Slide the hose on, push it on all the way, and put the clamp on. All right, let's get these two hoses reconnected here. I'm going to put a new clamp on this one right here. Slide it on, make sure it's bottomed out, and put the clamp where it needs to be. That way it seals up nice and tight. And then this one right here was just a kind of a quick connect thing. You press it on, make sure you hear it click. There we go, that just clicked in. Give it a tug, make sure it's secure. Bring the fuel tank up so that we can connect the filler hose and these two breather hoses there. As you bring it up, just make sure it's not crushing anything that it's not supposed to, such as parking brake cables, other hoses up top, lines. Make sure it's not jamming itself into the sway bar here, as it's going up. Okay, move it past. At this point, it's not fully up, but it's high enough to where I can reach these two hoses, so let's reconnect those. Let's take these caps off. And now put the lines back on. I'll grab some new clamps for these as well. Slide the clamps on. I'll snug them up in a minute. For now, I just want to put the hoses on. Again, slide it all the way down. All right, let's tighten up the clamps. Let's get the filler neck back on. There we go. Make sure this gets pressed down as far down as it'll go. Now take your straps, and I'm going to tuck them up and over the sway bar here. Make sure that they kind of go to where they're supposed to go. Just leave them like this for now. We'll come back to them in a little bit, but I wanted to make sure that they go in their approximate location. So again, make sure you're not crushing anything you're not supposed to be. Okay, that's fully seated all the way. All right, let's put the strap up and start in the bolts. Make sure they're nice and snug. Let's do the other one as well. Let's remove the support. Let's put this parking brake cable back where it belongs and re-secure it with a little 10mm bolt. Now let's go ahead and put the exhaust back on, of course, put on a new gasket at the front and at the rear. Let's reattach this hanger at the back. There we go, push the hanger all the way through. Now let's reconnect the front hanger. Slide it on, and let's bolt it up. Let's get these two bolts back in. Snug them up. Perfect. Let's get the front bolts in and tightened up. Let's put this cover back on and then re-secure it with the two bolts. Snug them up. Now flip this cover over, connect the electrical connector to the pump. Make sure that clicks. There we go. And now put the cover back on. There's a little nub right here. The nub lines up with this cutout. That's how you know which way it's supposed to go. And also this triangle points to this indent on the body of the vehicle. Anyway, press it down. Make sure it seals up. If for some reason it doesn't, you can get some more butyl tape, stick it on there, make it seal up somehow. It's important that you don't get debris, water, fumes, anything in the car. So we're here. Now let's get the back seat on. Get the back seat back in. Make sure your seat belts are going through. Press it in and back at the same time. And when these tabs at the front are lined up, you'll feel them want to slide down. Press them. Let's go on the other side. Now start up the vehicle. Make sure it runs smoothly.